Hello, everybody. We are honored today to have with us Mr. Seymour Hersh. Now, this is a man of dignity and class and style and grace and information that's very important to know about and read about. He just came out with this article, How America Took Out the Nord Stream Pipeline. And if you click down below, you can read the whole article. Now, this is a Seymour Hersh who gained recognition when he came out and exposed the terrible My Lai massacre that happened in Vietnam. He's also the author of a number of great books, and he also is the guy, that one of his books is the Price of Power, Kissinger in the Nixon White House. And of course, he talks a lot about Nixon as well in a number of his books. He's the top of the top, a real man, that grew up without like these daddy's boys over here. He's a man that worked his way up and knows what it is. And what he said about journalism and the golden years are gone, it's so true. So here's Mr. Seymour Hersh to tell you about the Nord Stream pipeline, who did it, why, where and when, and much, much more. I'd like you to comment on this. This is quoting you. You said that you describe yourself as a reporter, quote, as a survivor of a golden age in journalism. You said it was a time when, quote, we did not have to compete with 24-hour news channels. Newspapers were awash with advertising revenue, and I was free to travel as much as I wanted. You went on to say you could reveal, quote, important and inconvenient truths. So that's a quote by you. Those days are gone, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Now you got, I don't know. We're talking about, I joined the New York Times. Well, I did the My Lai stuff in 1969, a year and a half after My Lai. And even then I had a hell of a time getting it published, but I got it published. And people picked it up and they weren't afraid to touch it. And, I'll tell you something about that story. Guys like you that served in Vietnam that ended up going into, let's say, the intelligence community. They were in the military and they went in, and let's say they were a generation. And some of these people, stay on a long time. If you retire and you become an annuitant, you're still in the job because you're very good at what you do and you care about it. I'm talking about deep inside. And so what it is, the guys that come to me or that I know are guys that saw firsthand what happened, didn't like it, went through it, and they're guys that took the oath of office when they became higher ranking people. You take an oath of office at higher levels. It's not to their boss or the colonel or the general, or it's not even to the president. It's to the Constitution. And those are the people I deal with that actually, and they look me out sometimes. For the last 30, 40 years, I find people that have called me up and said, we better start talking because things are crazy here. But things were okay. The news business, I wrote maybe 150, 200 stories for the New York Times without a source named, just said a source said. I wrote about the CIA going after Allende. I wrote about the CIA spying on American civilians. I wrote about the CIA and the NSA trying to get a Russian submarine up from the bottom without naming a source. And into the paper it went because they knew me and they trusted me. And it's not that people don't know me and don't trust me. It's just they don't want to hear it anymore. And I think Trump, CNN, NBC, and Fox, I felt it's been a pollutant because you're either like Fox or you're like the other side. And so there's no middle ground and they all hate each other. And CNN and MSNBC, if they can't get something about Trump on every day, now they're doing something about that kid from the congressman who lied about everything. He's a good story too. So they do that. There's no news anymore.
Yeah.
And then and when I was there busting stories in the 70s, like on Vietnam and Watergate in the afternoon, I'd go all day in a story. And I'm writing for a daily newspaper. And sometimes I had a good story going, and the public relations people, there was just a couple of people in the New York Times would call up and say, NBC or CBS wants to do it. And I said, what are you talking about? Go on, read it in the paper. They don't have to go on television about something. The idea of doing it. And now the idea of doing a story and not going on CNN or MSNBC, the yap about it, and now they're all getting paid probably more money from the cable companies than they do. And so you have a situation where cable comes in, they have no discernment. Something happens, they run, it's called a cron, they run a little thing, breaking news. Nobody checks anything, nobody looks at it, nobody spends a week on a story or a month on a story. And so when I come up with something like this, I've obviously spent 3, maybe more than that on it. I've done a lot of time on that story. And if you read it, you can see it because I've got all this detail about meetings.
I read it.
Well, yeah, of course. It's a fish out of water.
Yeah.
And I've done more stories about it. We use the Norwegians, and I did another story for Substack about how we use the Norwegians undercover in North Vietnam. Norwegians and us have been together in COVID ops. It's not just new we went to Norway. Norwegians, they hate Russia. What worries me now is hating Russia and hating Putin and not liking China as is boxing us in. How are you going to get out of this mess? I'll tell you something. I do talk to people that see stuff, and I don't talk about I don't care about day-to-day intelligence, but the chances of the Ukrainian army beating the Russians, whether you like Russia or don't like Russia, the Russians in the Stalingrad, everybody knows about Stalingrad. They lost 20 million people in World War II. That's a lot of soldiers. They were losing in the last 3 or 4 days of Stalingrad. They were losing every 48 hours, 4 days. Every 4 hours, every day, 2,400 killed and wounded in the last couple of days, and they kept on going, and they beat the Nazis back. And so you can understand. Maybe you don't have to understand it, but they're very tough, and the regular army hasn't gone in yet. And unlike us, when we want more guns, when the president wants more, we put $113 billion in there already.
I know.
And I will tell you, by fall, when he decided to blow up the stuff in the pipeline, I assuming you'll introduce me and tell something about the story. By that time, they was pretty sure that at best it was going to be a standoff, and a very expensive, killing a lot of people, a lot of money. And he was the whole point of blowing up the pipelines. I don't know why it's so hard for people to understand that. The whole point is the Germans, after World War II, they spent 10, 15 years trying to rape, murder, and mutilate and bomb everything in Europe. They leaned over backwards to get back in good graces. The Germans are not interested in rearming. That will make the French will go crazy. There was a lot of worry about the Germans being even in NATO back then, 50 years ago. And so the Germans don't, they'll put some money in, but they don't want to go in all the way in Ukraine. Particularly, it doesn't look like a winner. And